I'll be reading Psalms 51, 6 through 13. I'll be reading from the New King James Version. Again, Psalms 51, 6 through 13. Behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part you will make me to know wisdom. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me hear joy and gladness, that the bones you have broken may rejoice. Hide your face from sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me by your generous spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners shall be converted to you.
Good morning, Sun Valley. Great to see you all here this morning. Very thankful for this opportunity to be able to be here and speak to you all this morning. If you were not here last week during the budget review, we had made an announcement that my family and I are going to be moving to Ohio in March. So please pray with us in this transition as we go through this. Now, as I was asked to preach this morning, I wanted to do something that was kind of not personal to me, but something that has caused me to want to draw closer to God more. And the person that I look up to, one of my favorite people in the Bible, is King Josiah. And I hope that as we study King Josiah, that you'll feel this same way too. But I want you to imagine that you are going camping. And for those of you that don't go camping, just bear with me. I don't go that much either. So when you're going out camping, you have all the necessities that you need. You have your tent and your pocket knife and whatever you need there. And you're outside and you're going fishing, and all of a sudden you feel it's kind of getting cold. And you decide to tell yourself, well, I'm going to go build myself a fire. So you go and you get the necessities and you go and build yourself a fire, but all of a sudden you see these clouds. They're covering the sun. It's about to rain. But that's not going to stop you. You still want to build the fire. So you still build the fire and you get a spark and you start, and it starts to ignite, but then it starts pouring down rain. But you still want the fire. So you keep trying, and you know that when the sticks are wet and you're trying so hard, it's hard to get that ignition because it's wet. But you still want that fire. But the rain keeps putting out your fire. As we go on our spiritual walk and our spiritual journey, sometimes we have too much rain in our life. And sometimes the fire that is in our life and the fire that we say that we have for God is always put out because of the rain that is in our life. Now, when you look at King Josiah and his reform, you're going to see some things. You're going to see how convicted he was when he read the book of the covenant. And how convicted he was that he said, we need to make a change, not tomorrow, not the day after, not an hour later, now. We need to make a change. He was convicted, and you'll see the results of his conviction. But there is a danger in going through the motions. There's a danger in coming to services Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights, and just going through the motions. And just saying, well, I'm just here because I need to be. It's Sunday. It's part of my routine. I just need to be here. But our environment must be pure to focus correctly on Christ. If we continue to allow the rain to put out our fire, we are never going to have that focus to correctly focus on Christ. So this morning, as we talk about King Josiah, we need to remember that we need to be free of guilt and the urgency in rekindling this fire. The urgency in reigniting this fire, reigniting this passion. If you have lost your passion for Christ, then this lesson is for you. But if you still have your passion for Christ today, then this lesson is for you. We need to remember to continue to have our fire lit. So we're going to learn about the focus of Josiah had and his covenant with the Lord. So if you would, please turn your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 23. And that's where we're going to primarily be this morning. 2 Kings chapter 23. And again, I told you I was trying a different way to do this. It is going to be on the screen. But I encourage you to look through the Bible as well, in case I have missed a verse. 2 Kings chapter 23, we're going to start in verse 1 here, when King Josiah has found this book of the covenant. And it says, "Then the king sent, and they gathered to him all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. And the king went up to the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great, and read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord. So then the king stood by the pillar, and he made a covenant before the Lord, to walk after the Lord, to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all of his heart and with all his soul, and to carry out the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people entered into the covenant." And verse 4. "Then the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the doorkeepers, to bring out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal and Asherah, and for all of the hosts of heaven. And he burned them outside of Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron, and carried their ashes to Bethel." So just these first 4 verses, we're going to see that the first thing Josiah does is he gets rid of these physical objects. Okay, this is the first thing that he does. But I want you to see that they find this book of the covenant, which is believed to be the Torah, right? We see that he found the book of the covenant, and it is read amongst all the people. And Josiah goes and he stands by a pillar and he says, "God, I'm going to make this promise to you. I'm going to walk after you. I'm going to keep your commandments and your statutes and your ordinances, and I'm going to do it with all my heart and with all my soul, because you're worth that." And what we're doing right now, it's not it. What we're doing right now and worshiping idols, this is not what we're supposed to be doing. So in verse 4, you see the first thing that King Josiah does is he gets rid of those physical idols. Those idols that were made for Baal and those idols that were made for the Asherah, he found them and he destroyed them. Took them out of the house of the Lord. These idols were not in random places. They were in the house of the Lord. If you remember back to 1 Kings chapter 12, 1 Kings chapter 12, and I'll just read it here real quick. 1 Kings 12 and verses 26 to 29, it says, "Jeroboam said in his heart, 'Now the kingdom will return to the house of David. If this people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then the heart of his people will return to their Lord, even to Rehoboam the king of Judah. And they will kill me and return to Rehoboam king of Judah.' So the king consulted and made 2 golden calves, and he said to them, 'It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold, your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt.' He set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan." So we have King Jeroboam. This is the beginning of the divided kingdom, where he put 2 idols, one in Bethel and one in Dan, because he didn't want the people to leave. And he said, "You know what, Israel, here is your gods, the one that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Here they are." And from there, you have all these idols forming and coming into the house of the Lord. And now, they brought these idols into the house of the Lord, and these idols to Baal and to Asherah, this was the god of the sun, right? And Asherah, that the Canaanite goddess, a wooden pole. But think back to Deuteronomy chapter 10, and I'm thinking about Josiah's covenant here, to walk after God, to keep his commandments. When you read about Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 12, this is Moses speaking. And in verse 12, it says, "Now Israel, what does the Lord your God require from you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul." Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like the covenant that Josiah made to God? Josiah said that he will walk and he will live a life after God. Again, to walk is the way that you conduct your life. I will conduct my life in a way that is worthy in your sight. In a way that I'm not worshiping these idols, I'm worshiping you. And then he says he's going to keep, which means to guard or to watch over something. He's going to keep these commandments, these statutes, the ordinances from God. I will make sure that I guard this with my life, and if I fall away from them, I will make sure I come back to those things. And he will carry out, he will establish, institute, or enact what God ordained. Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. And the last thing, when you see in verse 4 here, he burned those idols. It was destroyed by fire. He got rid of them. You can't put them back together. I don't know if you've ever been to a rage room. It's fun. But if you've ever been to a rage room, they put items in front of you that you get to smash, right? And one of the items I chose was a vacuum. So I put the vacuum on the ground and I smashed it. And my other friend, he was with me, and we both smashed it. Well, we smashed it so much that it was in pieces. You couldn't put that back together. These burning of these idols, you couldn't put these back together. They were done away with. He got rid of these idols. In our own life, we may not have these physical idols that they were worshiping, but we have idols. We know what day it is today, right? Stupid Broncos are playing, right? Just joking, Cup. But Broncos are playing, right? And now we have people that are getting ready for the game. They're tailgating. They're going and making sure that they get their seats early. They're going and they're celebrating because their team is in the championship. Where are they not? Not here. They're not here worshiping God. And it doesn't even have to be sports. Family can be an idol. Friends can be an idol. Money can be an idol. Jobs can be an idol. Whatever you decide to put in front of God is an idol. And these people, they were led astray. Remember, this divided kingdom was filled with good and bad kings, and they all brought these idols within the house of the Lord so that they all could worship these idols. They were led astray for so long, and finally Josiah says, enough is enough. We need to put these idols away. We need to get rid of them because this is not how God wants us to worship him. And so the first thing he does is he gets rid of these idols. But the second thing he does is found in verse 5. 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 5. He did away with the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had appointed to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah, and in the surrounding area of Jerusalem, also those who burn incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the constellations, and to all the hosts of heavens. So the first thing he does is he gets rid of these idols. But the second thing he does is he gets rid of the people that promote sin. These priests that are leading these people away, and they're identified as idolatrous priests. These priests that were leading the people to worship these idols. Get them out of there, right? Get rid of them. You know, these previous kings who have appointed these priests, and these people look to these priests as leaders. These people should know what they're doing, right? They've studied. They should know what they're talking about. I'm going to follow them rather than listening to anybody else. They should know what they're talking about. They were led astray. And Josiah did away with them, which was to put an end or to a state or an activity. This was not going to happen anymore. He's purifying this environment, this house of the Lord that has been taken for granted, that people have put these different things and these worldly things into this house of the Lord, that Josiah says, no, take it all out. It doesn't belong there. Those people that are leading those people away, They don't need to be there anymore. They don't need to be in that position because they're leading the people away from God. Get them out of your life. The third thing that Josiah does is found in verses 6 through 10. Chapter 23, verses 6 through 10. He brought out the Asherah from the house of the Lord outside Jerusalem to the brook Kidron and burned it at the brook Kidron and ground it to dust and threw its dust on the graves of the common people. He also broke down the house of the male cult prostitutes, which were in the house of the Lord, where the women were weaving hangings for Asherah. Verse 8, then he brought out all the priests from the cities of Judah, and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense from Geba to Beersheba, and he broke down the high places of the gates which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on his left at the city gate. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places did not go up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread among their brothers. And he also defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, that no man makes his son or his daughters pass through the fire from Molech. So here we have that King Josiah, he gets rid of these physical objects. He burns them. He makes sure that they can't rebuild these things. And then he gets rid of those people that are promoting sin, those people that are leading them to worship those idols. But then he gets rid of the places where they sinned, the places that they could go back to sin. Notice he got rid of the male cult prostitutes, and these women were weaving hangings for Asherah in the house of the Lord. In the place where it should be worshiping God, they were able to make things for idols, for other things other than God. But he grounds them, right, to pulverize by making it into powder. He made those idols, those things, he made them to dust, right? And he threw them into the brook Kidron. He broke it down to make it fall, collapse, right? To defile, to make morally or ritually impure. What they were doing was impure. What Josiah is doing here is he's getting rid of these things so that he can purify his environment, so that he can say, enough is enough. We need to be pure before God. We need to not have guilt. We need to be free of guilt. All these things that you are doing and making things for these idols, for Baal, for Asherah, and making these little items for them and worshiping them, that is not God. That is not the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And you have been misled. That is why these objects need to be burned. That's why these people need to go away. That's why the places where you went to go sin, that's why that needs to go away. And then he says, no son or daughter was to be offered to Molech. I don't know if you remember, and I can't remember the specific book that talks about Molech and offering children. But there were people that were offering children as a sacrifice to their God. How sad is that? That the God that they serve, they need to offer children. And Josiah says, no more of that. No more sons, no more daughters were to be offered like that. But then he goes to verse 11. In verse 11 of chapter 23, is he did away with the horses, which the kings of Judah had given to the sun, at the entrance of the house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan Melech, the official, which was in the precincts. And he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. So he gets rid of the objects. He gets rid of the people. He gets rid of the places. And now he gets rid of the passing benefits. He gets rid of the horses. And some of you might say, well, what was wrong with the horses? Well, if you think about horses during that time, there was two things about these horses. One, these horses, they were valuable military assets, right? They were very valuable to the armies. If you had horses, you were powerful, right? But also, horses were also being offered as sacrifices, right? You go to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4, in verse 16. It says, so that you do not act corruptly and make a graven image for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. That is not the verse I wanted to read, but they were acting corruptly, right? They were doing things that they shouldn't have been, which were offering these horses to these gods. And then in chapter 17 and verse 16, it says, moreover, he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. Since the Lord has said to you, you shall never again return that way. These horses, these people that were accumulating all of these horses, you're going to rely on them and not rely on God. How many times today do we rely on our things and our possessions and our idols and all these other things and don't rely on God? Satan has so many benefits that he can offer us. Things that he dangles in front of our face to say, look at this over here. You don't need that. You don't need that Christian life. You don't need to follow God. Look over here. This is shiny. This is new. This is nice. But I guarantee you, Satan has not much to offer than what God has to offer you. Josiah, he gets rid of these passing benefits. He gets rid of these things that these people were worshiping. But then he has to get rid of these pieces forever. In 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 12, it says, the altars which were on the roof, the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the king of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of the Lord, the king broke down, and he smashed them there, and threw their dust into the brook Kidron. So he does all of these things, right? But the second to last thing he does here is he gets rid of these pieces forever. Now you notice that he broke down these places, right? He broke them down, they made them fall, he made them collapse, but then he smashed it, right? To use your feet to destroy. Those things, those idols that they were using, he stomps on it. You know, he makes sure that they're grounded, that they're turned to dust, and he makes sure that you cannot rebuild these things. But then he throws it. He threw it into the brook Kidron to forcefully throw something, right? These things need to be gone. He throws it away. But is that enough to just get rid of the pieces forever? You know, I gave this illustration at one point, but I want you to imagine an apartment, right? And your apartment is filled with boxes. And just say that these boxes represent sin. And you decide, you're sitting there, you're looking at all these boxes, and you say, I need to get this out of my life. So what do? You take the boxes, you put them in your truck, but instead of going to destroy the boxes, you take them to a storage unit. And you put them and you store them there. And you say, I'm never going to touch these. These are just going to be locked away, put away, and I'm not going to touch it. Well, what happens when you return back to that empty house? What happens? You start thinking about one of the boxes that you put away. Oh, maybe I put that away too soon. So you get in your truck and you drive back and you get that box and you bring it back home. And then you say, oh, that other one was pretty nice too. And so you get in your truck and you go back and you take another box and bring it back home. Pretty soon, your house is filled with boxes again. Because you didn't go to destroy them, you store it away. But you see, Josiah didn't just get rid of these pieces forever. He replaced them with proper practices. In 2 Kings chapter 23, and starting in verse 21, and the king commanded all the people, saying, celebrate the Passover to the Lord your God. And as it is written in this, the book of the covenant, surely a Passover had not been celebrated from the days of the judges who had judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was observed to the Lord in Jerusalem. So Josiah replaces these with proper practices. He gets rid of these pieces forever, but he replaces them. Now, remember the purpose of Josiah getting rid of all of these things, because he's purifying this environment. But it's not enough to just get rid of it. You need to understand what we're supposed to be doing. And so he establishes the Passover. We will celebrate the Passover again. And in the 18th year of Josiah, this was instituted. This was observed to be done or carried out. Now that everything is done, now that everything that is impure is done away with, now we start with everything that is pure. But I want you to observe this covenant from King Josiah. In verse 25 of chapter 23, it says, "Before him there was no king like him. No king like him who turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him." In verse 3, "The king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord, to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and with all his soul, to carry out the words of this covenant that were written in this book." You want to talk about conviction? There it is. He made a covenant before God, and he said, "I'm going to keep this covenant before God." And here in verse 25, there is no king like him who turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might. But then we have to ask about ourselves. Do you love God this much? Do you love God enough to do these things? In verse 25. I wrote it on your paper. This is for your personal answering, right? But do I love God enough? Do I love God enough to get rid of the physical objects in my life? Those things that I always have time for, right? TV, music, friends and family and all those things. But I certainly have no time for God. Why is that? Do you love God enough to turn and say, you know what? I need to make more time. I need to make him my priority. Or is it, I'll get to you when I have time? Do you love God enough? Do I love God enough to get rid of the people that promote sin? Those people that tell you you don't need God. You don't need to go to church. You would rather go to church than spend my birthday with me? You would rather go and go worship God and go do that thing for an hour and 2 hours, and rather than doing something with me that you could have fun doing? And that bothers us sometimes, because sometimes we don't want to lose those relationships. But is God worth more than those relationships in your life? Do I love God enough to get rid of the places where I sin? We have places where we've been that if we really thought about it, if we went back to those places, it'd be trouble. But do we have them in the storage? Do we have them in the back of our mind? Do we know where to go if we're facing something, if we have a temptation, if we say, you know, if I ever get bothered, if I ever get tempted, that I know exactly where to go? Because that's where I went before. Or do you say, I love God enough to not go back to that place because I value this relationship, because I love him? Do I love God enough to get rid of those passing benefits, that no matter the many things that Satan offers you, it is no match for what God has to offer you? Do you love God enough to get rid of those things forever? Destroy those boxes. Burn them so that they can't ever appear back in your life. But then are you able to replace it with proper practices? Are you going to pray more? Are you going to talk to God more? Are you going to make sure that coming to church and spending time with like-minded Christians is a priority? Are you going to make sure that when you walk after God and live a life after God, that it is a choice because you love him and you choose him over the things of this world? Do you love God enough? are you going to turn like Josiah? Notice this turn was not, an hour later or 2 hours later, or it was immediate. Remember when Paul became a Christian and when Paul was baptized, right? When Paul was baptized and he came out of that water, he waited to go preach the word, right? No, it was immediate. He immediately went to go work for Christ. If there is things in your life that are causing you to doubt, if there are things in your life that is causing you to put God second, if there are things in your life that are troubling you, I'm asking you and I'm urging you to turn. If you're not a Christian this morning, I'm asking you to turn. Those things that Satan is offering you right now, it is no match for what God can offer you. It is no match. I'm asking you to turn, to get rid of all those things, and to come to Christ, to be baptized, and to be one of His children. But if you are a Christian, and some of those things are in your life right now, some of those idols, some of those places, some of those benefits, some of those things, your environment is always going to be put out by the rain. The rain is always going to put your fire out unless you get rid of the rain. Get rid of the things that are causing that rain. Our love for God should drive us to purify our environment. If there is a need this morning, please let it be known as we stand and sing.